r/TrueOffMyChest husband called his abuse a love tap, so I showed him real pain. The bruise on my cheek was still tender when Mark walked through the door that evening, whistling like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he hadn't backhanded me hard enough to knock me into the kitchen counter 12 hours earlier. "Hey babe," he called out, dropping his briefcase by the door. "What's for dinner?" I touched the concealer I'd caked over the purple mark, feeling the soreness pulse under my fingertips. 3 months. 3 months of escalating accidents and playful swats that left me walking on eggshells in my own home. But this morning had been different. This morning, when I'd finally worked up the courage to tell him he was hurting me, he'd laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on, Sarah. It was just a love tap. Don't be so dramatic." A love tap. That's what he called the strike that left my face swollen and my lips split. A love tap that I had to explain away to my coworkers as walking into a cabinet door because the alternative, admitting that my successful, charming husband was systematically breaking me down piece by piece, felt impossible. "Takeout," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Thai food. It's on the counter." Mark nodded, already pulling out his phone to scroll through emails. Even now, even after what he'd done, he couldn't be bothered to look at me long enough to see the damage. Or maybe he just didn't care. I watched him settle into his routine, loosening his tie, complaining about his day, completely oblivious to the storm building inside me. This was the man I'd married 2 years ago. The man who used to bring me flowers just because it was Tuesday. The man who'd promised to protect me from the world, not become the thing I needed protection from. The first time he'd grabbed my wrist too hard, I'd convinced myself it was stress from his promotion. The second time he'd accidentally elbowed me in the ribs, I blamed his new workout routine making him unaware of his strength. By the 10th time, I'd run out of excuses, but somehow he always had more. "You're being too sensitive. I barely touched you. You bruised like a peach, that's not my fault. And always, it was just a love tap, baby. You know, I'd never really hurt you. But I was hurt. I was hurt and afraid and so tired of pretending everything was fine when my husband was slowly erasing the person I used to be, replacing her with this jumpy, quiet version who apologized for existing." "You're being weird tonight," Mark said, finally glancing up from his phone. His eyes skimmed over my face without really seeing it. "Everything okay?" I smiled, the same smile I'd perfected over months of hiding the truth. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. And after this morning, after he'd dismissed my pain like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience to his day, something inside me had finally snapped. Not broken, I was already broken. This was something else. Something sharper and more dangerous. Mark wanted to call his abuse love taps? Fine. But he was about to learn the difference between his version of love and actual consequences. I'd been recording our conversations for weeks now, documenting every accident and playful hit. The small camera I'd hidden in our living room had captured more than enough evidence. Tomorrow, his boss would receive a very interesting email. It was time Mark learned what real pain felt like. The next morning, Mark was in an unusually good mood. He hummed while getting dressed, even kissed my forehead before heading to work, carefully avoiding the side of my face that was still tender. The casual way he navigated around his own damage made my stomach turn. "Big presentation today," he said, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. "Johnson's been hinting about that senior partner track opening up. Could be looking at a serious promotion by year end." I nodded, stirring my coffee with shaking hands. His career. Always his precious career. The thing that mattered more than anything else in his world, including my safety. He'd built his reputation as the golden boy at Henderson and Associates, charming, reliable, the kind of guy everyone wanted on their team. If only they knew what he was like behind closed doors. "That's great, honey," I managed, hating how automatically the supportive wife act came to me now. After he left, I sat at my laptop for 2 hours, staring at the draft email I'd composed. The video files were attached, 3 different incidents from the past month, including yesterday morning's love tap that had sent me sprawling. The audio was crystal clear. Mark's voice dismissing my tears, his casual cruelty, the sound of impact. But my finger wouldn't click send. What if it backfired? What if they didn't believe the evidence? Worse, what if Mark found out I was the one who'd sent it before his boss could act? I'd seen him angry before, but never truly furious. The thought of what he might do if he felt cornered made my chest tight with panic. My phone rang, making me jump. Sarah Chen, my old college roommate. "Hey stranger," her voice was warm but concerned. "I was thinking about you. We haven't talked in forever. We used to talk every week. Before Mark started complaining that Sarah was too nosy and always stirring up drama. Before I started making excuses for why I couldn't meet for lunch or go to her birthday party. I've been busy," I lied, unconsciously touching my cheek. "Work's been crazy. Sarah." Her voice shifted, became more serious. "I saw you at the grocery store last week. You looked, I don't know, different. Smaller, somehow. Are you okay?" The genuine concern in her voice almost broke me. When was the last time someone had asked if I was okay and actually wanted to hear the real answer? "I'm fine," I said automatically, but my voice cracked on the words. "No, you're not." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "Talk to me. What's going on?" For a wild moment, I considered telling her everything. About the bruises and the gaslighting and the way Mark had systematically isolated me from everyone who cared about me. About the video file sitting on my computer and the email that could destroy his career. But what would be the point? Sarah would tell me to leave, to get help, to call the police. All the logical things that felt impossible when you were living inside the situation. She wouldn't understand that leaving wasn't as simple as packing a bag. That Mark's charm worked on everyone, even cops were susceptible to his particular brand of manipulation. "I really am fine," I repeated. "Just tired." After I hung up, I stared at the computer screen again. The cursor blinked in the recipient field, waiting. Mark's boss would be in his office by now, probably reviewing cases for the day. One click and Mark's carefully constructed world would start crumbling. The question was, would mine crumble with it, or would I finally be free? Outside, storm clouds were gathering, and I wondered if that was an omen. I closed the laptop without sending the email. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip my coffee mug. Every rational part of me screamed that I was being a coward, but the fear was paralyzing. What if Mark somehow traced it back to me before his boss could act? What if they sided with him, their golden boy with a perfect track record and the charming smile? The doorbell rang, making me nearly jump out of my skin. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a crisp business suit holding a clipboard. My heart hammered as I opened the door. Mrs. Davidson? I'm Jennifer Walsh from Henderson and Associates. I was hoping to speak with you about your husband's upcoming performance review. The blood drained from my face. This couldn't be happening. Had they already found the recordings somehow? I'm sorry, what? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Jennifer smiled warmly. Oh, don't look so worried. It's nothing bad. The firm is implementing a new 360-degree review process. We're interviewing family members about work-life balance, stress management, that sort of thing. Mark's been selected as one of our pilot candidates because of his exemplary record. I stared at her, my mind racing. They wanted to know about Mark's stress management. About how he handled pressure at home. Could I come in? It'll just take a few minutes. Before I could think of an excuse, I found myself stepping aside to let her in. She settled onto our couch, the same couch where I'd been accidentally shoved into the armrest hard enough to bruise my ribs 3 weeks ago. So, Jennifer pulled out a tablet. How would you say Mark handles work stress? Does he bring tension home with him? The irony was suffocating. Here was my chance to tell someone from his company the truth, but not the way I'd planned. No evidence, no recordings, just my word against his stellar reputation. He manages stress, uniquely, I said carefully. Jennifer nodded encouragingly. Can you elaborate on that? Sometimes he needs to release tension. Physical outlets. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. That's great. Exercise, sports, that sort of thing? Something like that. I touched my cheek unconsciously, and Jennifer's eyes followed the movement. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something, concern? Suspicion? But then she was back to her professional smile. And how is he with communication when he's stressed? Some of our attorneys can get a bit intense. The word hung in the air between us. Intense. Such a clean, corporate way to describe what Mark became when he was angry. Mark can be very direct when he's frustrated, I said. He doesn't always measure his impact on others. Jennifer was typing rapidly now. I see. And would you say this directness ever crosses professional boundaries? My mouth went dry. This was it, my opening. But the words stuck in my throat like glass shards. I wouldn't know about his professional relationships, I said finally. But Jennifer was studying me now, her gaze sharp and assessing. She'd stopped typing. Mrs. Davidson, are you all right? You seem nervous. I'm fine. Just not used to talking about Mark's work. Of course. She made another note. Just a couple more questions. Has Mark ever mentioned feeling out of control at work? Any incidents where his directness might have been misinterpreted? The question felt loaded, dangerous. Like she knew something I didn't. Why are you really here? I asked suddenly. Jennifer's professional mask slipped just slightly. What makes you think there's another reason? Performance reviews don't usually involve home visits. She closed her tablet and looked at me directly. Mrs. Davidson, has your husband ever discussed a complaint filed against him last week? The room tilted. Mark hadn't mentioned any complaint. He'd been celebrating his upcoming promotion just this morning. What kind of complaint? Jennifer's expression grew grave. The kind that makes family interviews necessary. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. A complaint. Someone at Mark's firm had filed a complaint against him, and now they were here, in our living room, asking me about his stress management and directness. What kind of complaint? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer studied my face carefully, and I could see her making calculations behind her professional demeanor. I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics, but it involves allegations of aggressive behavior toward a colleague. The world seemed to shift sideways. All this time, I thought I was Mark's only victim. That whatever darkness lived inside him was something he saved just for me, hidden behind closed doors where no one else could see. But if someone at work had complained. Mrs. Davidson, I need to ask you directly, has your husband ever displayed aggressive behavior at home? The question hung between us like a loaded gun. This was it. This was the moment I'd been building toward with my secret recordings and my unsent emails. Except it was happening in reverse, they'd come to me. I started, then stopped. Years of conditioning made the deflection automatic. Mark works very hard. Sometimes the pressure gets to him. Jennifer leaned forward slightly. That's not what I asked. Her directness caught me off guard. I touched my cheek again, a nervous habit I'd developed since the bruise. Jennifer's eyes tracked the movement with laser focus. Mrs. Davidson, I'm going to be frank with you. A junior associate at our firm alleges that your husband shoved her during a disagreement about case strategy. When confronted, he reportedly told her it was just a friendly nudge and that she was being overly dramatic about workplace interaction. The words hit me like physical blows. Overly dramatic, just a friendly nudge, the exact phrases he used on me, deployed with the same casual dismissal. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. Are you familiar with those phrases, Mrs. Davidson? I stared at her, unable to speak. How many times had Mark told me I was being dramatic? How many times had he minimized his violence with euphemisms that made me question my own reality? The associate also mentioned something else, Jennifer continued quietly. She said when she told him he'd hurt her, he laughed and called it a love tap. The coffee mug slipped from my nerveless fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. The crash seemed to echo in the sudden silence, and I stared down at the spreading puddle of coffee and ceramic shards like they held answers I desperately needed. Oh God, I whispered. Jennifer was off the couch immediately, kneeling beside me as I started to hyperventilate. Mrs. Davidson, Sarah, breathe. Just breathe. He calls them love taps, I gasped out between shallow breaths. That's what he calls them when he hits me. Love taps. The admission tumbled out before I could stop it, 3 months of buried truth spilling across the floor with the broken ceramic. Jennifer's face went very still, very professional. How long has this been happening? Since his promotion. 3 months, maybe 4. It started small, grabbing too hard, shoving past me. But yesterday. I gestured helplessly at my concealed bruise. Jennifer was already pulling out her phone. Sarah, I need you to listen to me carefully. What you just told me changes everything. The firm takes these allegations extremely seriously, especially when there's a pattern of behavior. You can't tell him I said anything, I said frantically. If he finds out I talked to you, he won't find out from me. But Sarah, you need help. Professional help. Through the window, I saw Mark's car pulling into our driveway. He was home early. He's here, I whispered, panic clawing at my throat. You have to go. Please, you have to leave right now. My heart hammered against my ribs as Mark's footsteps approached the front door. Jennifer was still crouched beside me, her professional composure cracking as she looked between me and the approaching sound of jingling keys. Sarah, I can't just leave you here, she whispered urgently. You have to. I grabbed her arm, probably too hard, but desperation made me strong. If he sees you here asking questions, if he thinks I said anything. The front door opened. Sarah? Whose car is in the driveway? Mark's voice carried that edge I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he was already irritated about something. Jennifer looked at me with something like horror dawning in her eyes. She was seeing it now, the terror that had become my constant companion. The way I went rigid at the sound of his voice, the way my breathing became shallow and careful. Bathroom, I hissed. Hide in the bathroom until he leaves. But it was too late. Mark's footsteps were already approaching the living room, and there was nowhere for Jennifer to go that wouldn't look suspicious. I scrambled to my feet, crushing ceramic under my shoes, and tried to position myself between her and the doorway. Sarah, what the hell happened in here? Mark appeared in the entrance, taking in the broken mug, the coffee spreading across the floor, and Jennifer rising slowly from her crouch beside the mess. For a split second, his face cycled through confusion, suspicion, and then that practiced charm I knew so well. But I'd seen that first flash of something darker, the look that usually preceded his love taps. Sorry, honey. I'm Jennifer Walsh from your firm. I was just conducting that family interview for your performance review and had a little accident with the coffee. Mark's smile was perfect, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was wondering what she'd seen, what I might have said, how much damage control he needed to do. Of course. Jennifer, right? Johnson mentioned you might be stopping by. He moved into the room with that easy confidence that had fooled everyone for so long. I hope my wife hasn't been boring you with domestic complaints. The casual dismissal in his tone, like anything I might say would automatically be trivial, made my stomach clench. Jennifer's posture had gone very straight, very alert. Actually, we were having quite an enlightening conversation about stress management, Jennifer said carefully. Something flickered across Mark's features. Stress management? How you handle pressure at home. Your wife was telling me about your direct communication style. Mark's eye snapped to mine, and I saw the warning there. The same look he'd given me yesterday morning before the love tap that had left my face swollen. Sarah tends to be sensitive, he said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure she made it sound more dramatic than it actually is. Asterisk sensitive. Dramatic asterisk the same words he'd used to gaslight the junior associate. Jennifer was hearing it now, seeing the pattern play out in real time. I don't think she was being dramatic at all, Jennifer said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mark's charming mask slipped just slightly, and I saw Jennifer notice it, the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands flexed at his sides. Well, Mark said, his voice still light but with steel underneath, I think Sarah might be feeling under the weather today. Maybe we should reschedule this conversation for when she's more herself. I'm exactly myself, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Mark turned that look on me full force, the one that usually made me apologize for existing. But with Jennifer watching, documenting, seeing everything, something inside me refused to shrink. Are you? Mark asked softly, and I heard the threat buried in those two simple words. Jennifer stepped forward slightly, a movement so subtle I almost missed it. But she was positioning herself between Mark and me, and the protective gesture gave me strength I didn't know I still had. The three of us stood there in the wreckage of my broken coffee mug, and I realized everything was about to change. The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Mark's eyes moved from Jennifer to me and back again, and I could practically see him recalculating, trying to figure out how to regain control of a situation that was spiraling away from him. You know what, Mark said suddenly, his tone shifting back to that practiced charm, I actually came home because I forgot some files for the Henderson meeting. Why don't I grab those while you two finish up? But he didn't move toward his office. Instead, he stepped closer, ostensibly to avoid the broken ceramic, but I felt the familiar intimidation in his proximity. The way he used his size to make me feel small and cornered. Jennifer noticed. I saw her eyes track his movement, saw the slight tension that entered her shoulders. That won't be necessary, she said firmly. I think I have everything I need for now. Everything? Mark's voice carried a subtle emphasis that made my skin crawl. Sarah can be quite imaginative when she's having one of her episodes. Episodes. That was new. He'd never called them episodes before, but I could see him constructing a narrative in real time, painting me as unstable, unreliable. The same way he'd probably tried to discredit the junior associate who'd complained about him. I haven't noticed any signs of instability, Jennifer replied coolly. Your wife seems perfectly lucid to me. Mark's laugh was just a fraction too loud, too forced. Of course she does. Sarah's very good at putting on a brave face for company. Aren't you, sweetheart? The endearment felt like a slap. He was testing me, seeing if I'd play along with his performance now that we had an audience. The old Sarah would have smiled and agreed, would have helped him maintain the illusion that everything was fine. But the woman standing in this room, surrounded by the evidence of her own fear, wasn't the same person who'd been making excuses for months. I'm not having an episode, Mark, I said quietly. I'm having a conversation. His mask slipped again, just for a second, but long enough for Jennifer to catch it. The flash of anger, quickly suppressed but unmistakably there. Right, of course. Your conversation about my alleged stress management issues. He was looking directly at me now, and his meaning was clear. What exactly did you tell her? Jennifer cleared her throat. Mr. Davidson, I should mention that this interview was prompted by a specific incident at your workplace. A complaint filed by a colleague regarding aggressive behavior. Mark went very still. A complaint? A female colleague reported that you shoved her during a disagreement and then dismissed her concerns about the physical contact. I watched Mark's face cycle through surprise, calculation, and then that dangerous calm that always preceded his worst moments. But he couldn't lose control here, not with a witness from his firm. Not when his precious career hung in the balance. That's a complete misunderstanding, he said finally. I may have brushed past her in the hallway. If she interpreted that as aggressive, then clearly there's been a miscommunication. Brushed past her. Just like he'd brushed against me when he shoved me into the kitchen counter. Just like every violent act was somehow accidental, misinterpreted, blown out of proportion. She also mentioned that you used the phrase love tap when she confronted you about it. The blood drained from Mark's face. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely rattled, caught off guard by having his own words thrown back at him. I don't recall using that exact phrase. But Jennifer was watching me now, seeing the recognition in my eyes, the way my hand instinctively moved to my cheek again. It's an interesting choice of words, Jennifer said softly. Quite distinctive. Mark's breathing had changed, become more controlled. He was fighting for composure, but I could see the rage building beneath the surface. The same rage that had exploded yesterday morning when I dared to tell him he was hurting me. And suddenly I realized that Jennifer wasn't just here for an interview. She was here because they already suspected. They were building a case, and I was either going to be a witness or another victim. The choice was mine. I could feel the moment crystallizing around us, like the air itself was holding its breath. Mark's carefully constructed world was cracking at the seams, and I was standing at the fault line watching it happen. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He uses that phrase quite often. Mark's head snapped toward me, his eyes blazing with a fury that made my knees weak. But Jennifer was here. Jennifer was documenting everything. For the first time in months, I wasn't alone with his anger. Sarah, Mark said, his voice carrying a warning that would have silenced me yesterday. I think you're confused. No, I'm not. The words came out stronger than I'd spoken in months. Love tap. That's what you called it yesterday morning when you hit me hard enough to leave a bruise. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer had gone very still beside me, her tablet forgotten in her hands. Mark looked like I'd physically struck him, his mouth opening and closing without sound. He started, then stopped, seeming to realize that anything he said now could be used against him. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Jennifer asked quietly. Mark's eyes darted between us, and I could see him scrambling for an explanation that would minimize the damage. Sarah fell. She's been clumsy lately, haven't you, sweetheart? Always walking into things, tripping over her own feet. The gaslighting was so automatic, so practiced, that for a second I almost doubted myself. But then I remembered the sound of his palm connecting with my cheek, the way his college ring had scraped against my skin. I didn't fall, I said. You backhanded me because I asked you to stop grabbing my wrist so hard. You're having another episode, Mark said desperately, his charm completely abandoned now. Jennifer, she does this sometimes. Gets confused about what really happened, makes up stories. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended, surprising all of us. Just stop lying. Mark took a step toward me, that familiar intimidation tactic, but Jennifer immediately moved closer to my other side. The protection was subtle but unmistakable. Mr. Davidson, Jennifer said firmly, I think you should step back. Step back? In my own home? Mark's voice was rising now, the mask finally slipping completely. This is insane. You come into my house, fill my wife's head with ideas, and now you're telling me how to behave in my own living room? I'm telling you to give your wife space while she's speaking. My wife is having a breakdown. Mark exploded. She's been unstable for months, making accusations, imagining things. Like the junior associate at your firm imagined being shut? The question hit Mark like a physical blow. I watched him realize that his two worlds, the careful violence at home and the workplace aggression he thought he could control, were colliding in ways he'd never anticipated. That was completely different, he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. Was it? Jennifer pulled out her phone. Because I'm looking at a pattern here. Female colleague reports being physically intimidated and having her concerns dismissed. Wife shows signs of abuse and describes identical language patterns. Tell me, Mr. Davidson, what's different about these situations? Mark stared at her phone like it was a weapon pointed at his chest. You're recording this? I'm documenting it. Just like I documented my conversation with your colleague. Just like I'll document whatever your wife chooses to tell me. The power had shifted completely. Mark, who'd spent months making me feel powerless and small, was now the one looking cornered and desperate. Sarah, he said, his voice taking on a pleading quality I'd never heard before. Tell her this is all a misunderstanding. Tell her about your episodes, your confusion. You know I'd never hurt you on purpose. But I was done protecting him from the consequences of his choices. No, I said simply. I won't. His face went white with rage. The fury that crossed Mark's face in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever seen from him. Not the cold calculation that usually preceded his love taps, but something raw and desperate. A cornered animal realizing his carefully constructed lies were crumbling. You ungrateful, he lunged forward, his hand already raised, and I flinched backward into Jennifer. Mr. Davidson, stop. Jennifer's voice cracked like a whip, and Mark froze mid-motion, his hand still suspended in the air between us. For several heartbeats, we all stood frozen in that terrible tableau. Mark's raised hand, my cowering posture, Jennifer's protective stance between us. The truth of our marriage laid bare in a single, crystalline moment. Jesus Christ, Jennifer breathed, and I realized she was staring at Mark's face. The mask had fallen away completely, revealing something ugly and violent that made her take an instinctive step back. Mark seemed to realize what he'd almost done in front of a witness. His hand dropped slowly, and he tried to reconstruct his composure, but it was too late. Jennifer had seen everything she needed to see. I wasn't going to, Mark started, his voice shaking. She made me so. She made you? Jennifer's voice was ice cold. Your wife made you raise your hand to strike her? No, that's not, I would never, Mark was spiraling now, his usual smooth explanations failing him completely. Sarah, tell her. Tell her I've never actually hit you. But we both knew that was a lie. The bruise on my face was proof enough, hidden under layers of concealer that felt heavier with each passing moment. You hit me yesterday, I said quietly. And last week when I burned dinner. And the week before that when I forgot to pick up your dry cleaning. Each admission felt like pulling glass from a wound, but also strangely liberating. The truth, after months of burial, was finally seeing daylight. They were accidents, misunderstandings. Which one was the accident? I interrupted, finding strength I didn't know I still possessed. When your palm connected with my cheek, or when you told me I was being dramatic about the pain? Mark's mouth worked soundlessly. For the first time since I'd known him, he had no smooth words, no rational explanations that could twist reality to his advantage. Jennifer was typing rapidly on her tablet, documenting everything. Mrs. Davidson, are you willing to file a formal complaint with both the police and your husband's firm? The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was it, the point of no return. Once I said yes, once I made this official, there would be no going back to the careful pretense that had defined our marriage. Mark's eyes were pleading with me now, all his earlier anger replaced by something that looked almost like panic. Sarah, please. Think about what you're doing. Think about us, about our life together. Don't let some workplace misunderstanding destroy everything we built. What have we built, Mark? The question came out steadier than I felt. A marriage where I'm afraid to speak up? A home where I hide bruises under makeup? What exactly am I supposed to be protecting? I can change, he said desperately. I've been under so much pressure with work, but I can get help. We can go to counseling, work through this together. It was the first time he'd admitted there was actually something to work through, but somehow that felt more manipulative than his outright denials. You had 3 months to change, I said. 3 months while I made excuses for you, covered for you, convinced myself this was normal. But now I understand. No. The word came out with surprising force. You understand that you got caught. There's a difference. Jennifer cleared her throat. Mrs. Davidson? What would you like me to document? I looked at Mark, really looked at him. The man I'd married was still there somewhere, buried under months of escalating cruelty and manipulation. But so was the man who'd raised his hand to me in front of a witness, who'd spent months systematically breaking down my sense of reality. The choice was mine, and for the first time in months, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Yes, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. I want to file a formal complaint. Mark's face crumpled like I'd physically struck him. Sarah, no. Please, just think about this for one more minute. I've been thinking about it for months. I turned to Jennifer, feeling something like relief flood through me. What do I need to do? But before Jennifer could answer, Mark's phone started buzzing. He glanced at it reflexively, and I saw his face go from desperate to ashen in the span of a heartbeat. Shit, he whispered, staring at the screen. What? Jennifer asked sharply. Mark's hand was trembling as he held up his phone. It's Johnson. My boss. He's calling an emergency meeting. Says I need to be in his office in 30 minutes with a union representative. The timing felt surreal. Here we were, finally having the conversation that would change everything, and Mark's professional reckoning was happening simultaneously. Jennifer and I exchanged glances. That's faster than I expected, Jennifer murmured, then seemed to catch herself. I mean, you knew this was coming, Mark said, his voice hollow with realization. This wasn't just a performance review, was it? You already decided to fire me before you even came here. Jennifer's professional mask was firmly back in place. Mr. Davidson, I suggest you focus on preparing for your meeting with Mr. Johnson. Preparing? Mark laughed, but there was no humor in it. How do you prepare for career suicide? How do you explain that your wife has been? He stopped himself, seeming to realize he was about to blame me again. That your wife has been what? I asked quietly. Mark's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw genuine anguish there. Not just panic about his job, but something deeper. God, Sarah, what have I done? It was the closest thing to real remorse I'd heard from him in months, but it felt too little, too late. And the timing made it suspect. Was he sorry for hurting me, or sorry he'd gotten caught? You've shown me who you really are, I said. No, that's not, I'm not this person. The pressure, the promotion track, I've been losing myself. You've been finding yourself, I corrected. This is who you are when you think no one's watching. Jennifer cleared her throat. Mr. Davidson, you have 25 minutes to get to your office. Mrs. Davidson, would you like me to stay while you call someone to come be with you? The practical question cut through everything else. Mark would be leaving soon, but then what? I'd be alone in this house with a broken coffee mug and the weight of what I just set in motion. I don't know who to call, I admitted. The isolation Mark had carefully orchestrated suddenly felt crushing. Sarah Chen lived across town. My parents were in Florida. Most of our couple friends were really Mark's friends. There's no one? Jennifer asked gently. I thought about all the relationships I'd let wither, all the invitations I'd declined, all the concerned questions I'd deflected. I pushed everyone away. He didn't have to isolate me, I did it myself. Mark flinched like I'd slapped him. Sarah, I never asked you to. You didn't have to ask. You just made it clear that my friendships were inconvenient. That my family asked too many questions. That it was easier to stay home than deal with your mood when I got back. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his boss, probably wondering where he was. I have to go, Mark said, but he didn't move toward the door. Sarah, when I get back, can we talk? Really talk? I don't know if there's anything left to say. There has to be. We can't just. This can't be how it ends. But looking at him now, desperate, manipulative even in his panic, still trying to manage the situation instead of taking real responsibility, I realized it had ended months ago. I just hadn't been ready to see it. Go to your meeting, Mark. He stared at me for another long moment, then grabbed his keys and briefcase. At the door, he turned back one last time. I do love you, you know. Despite everything, I do love you. After he left, Jennifer and I stood in the wreckage of my living room, and I wondered if love was supposed to leave bruises. The silence after Mark left felt different than any quiet I'd experienced in months. Not the careful, walking on eggshell silence I'd grown accustomed to, but something cleaner. Like the air itself had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. Jennifer was still typing notes on her tablet, documenting everything that had just happened. The sound of her stylus against the screen was oddly comforting, proof that this conversation had been real, that I hadn't imagined the moment when everything finally cracked open. Sarah, she said gently, I need to ask you something important. Do you feel safe staying here tonight? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on finally telling the truth that I hadn't thought past this moment. Mark would come home from what was likely going to be a career-ending meeting. He'd be angry, desperate, humiliated. And I'd be here, having just destroyed the carefully constructed lie that held our life together. I don't know, I admitted. He's never been. I mean, when he gets really angry, he usually just gets colder. More cutting with his words. But today was different. The way he almost. I couldn't finish the sentence, but Jennifer nodded grimly. He almost lost complete control in front of a witness. Men like your husband, when their public image is threatened, can become unpredictable. She pulled a card from her briefcase. This is the number for a domestic violence shelter. They have advocates available 24/7. Domestic violence. Even after everything, hearing those words applied to my situation felt surreal. Those were words for other women, women whose situations were more dramatic than mine. Women whose husbands used fists instead of open palms. Women who ended up in emergency rooms instead of just managing. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, I said quietly. Jennifer's expression was understanding but firm. Sarah, you just watched your husband raise his hand to strike you in front of his colleague from work. What do you think he might do when there are no witnesses? The thought sent ice through my veins, but another part of me, the part that had been making excuses for months, pushed back. Maybe he meant it when he said he could change. Maybe this shock will. Will what? Magically transform him into a different person? Jennifer's voice was gentle but unyielding. How many chances have you already given him? How many times has he promised it was the last time? She was right, but admitting it felt like acknowledging that the last 2 years of my life had been built on a foundation of lies I told myself. My phone rang, startling us both. Sarah Chen's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Jennifer urged. Hey, Sarah's voice was warm but concerned. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation earlier. You didn't sound like yourself. I looked at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. Sarah, My voice cracked. I think I need help. What kind of help? Where are you? I'm at home, but Mark just left for work and I don't think I should be here when he gets back. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on? The whole story tumbled out, the months of escalating violence, the love taps that left bruises, the gaslighting that made me question my own reality. Sarah listened without interrupting, though I could hear her sharp intake of breath when I described yesterday's incident. I'm coming to get you, she said immediately. Pack whatever you need and I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sarah, you don't understand. If Mark finds out I left, if he thinks I'm talking to people, then we make sure he doesn't find out until you're somewhere safe. After I hung up, Jennifer was watching me with something like approval. Good choice, she said. And Sarah? The complaint we discussed, I'm filing it regardless of what happens with Mark's job. This goes beyond workplace conduct now. Through the window, I could see storm clouds gathering again, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the thunder. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Jennifer had left to file her reports, promising to call later, and I was alone in the house that had become my prison. I moved through the rooms mechanically, throwing essentials into a bag, clothes, documents, the flash drive where I backed up all my secret recordings. My hands shook as I packed, and every sound made me jump. A car door slamming somewhere in the neighborhood sent me rushing to the window, certain Mark had come back early. But the driveway remained empty. I was zipping up my suitcase when my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Asterisk meeting postponed until tomorrow. Coming home now. We need to talk, asterisk. The blood drained from my face. He'd be here in 10 minutes, maybe less. Sarah was still at least 5 minutes away, trapped in afternoon traffic. I stared at the message, paralyzed by the casual tone that somehow felt more threatening than outright anger. Another text came through. Asterisk, I know you're upset, but we can work through this. Just don't do anything we'll both regret, asterisk. The phrasing made my stomach clench. We'll both regret, as if I'd be responsible for whatever he did when he got home. As if his reaction to my honesty would somehow be my fault too. I grabbed my bag and headed for the front door, but the sound of an engine in the driveway stopped me cold. Through the peephole, I saw Mark's sedan pulling up behind my car, blocking me in. He was early. Panic flooded my system as I watched him sit in the car for a moment, staring at the house. Even from this distance, I could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel. This wasn't the Mark who came home whistling. This was someone else entirely. My phone rang, Sarah calling. I'm 2 minutes away, she said before I could speak. Are you ready? He's here, I whispered, backing away from the door. He's in the driveway. Shit. Okay, listen to me. Go to your bedroom and lock the door. I'm calling 911. No, don't, if the police come, he'll know I. Sarah, stop protecting him. He blocked your car in for a reason. Through the window, I watched Mark finally get out of his car. His movements were controlled, deliberate, but there was something coiled about his posture that scared me more than his earlier explosion. He stood for a moment looking at our house, and I saw him pull out his phone. My phone buzzed with another text. Asterisk, I saw the Henderson and Associates car leaving. I know what you told them, asterisk. The casual menace in those words made my knees weak. How long had he been watching? Had he seen Jennifer's car, waited until she left before coming home? Asterisk, I'm disappointed, Sarah. I thought we were a team, asterisk. The front door handle turned. Sarah? Mark's voice carried through the house, artificially calm. I know you're here. Your car's in the garage. I pressed myself against the bedroom wall, phone clutched to my chest. Sarah was still on the line, and I could hear her car engine, close but not close enough. Let's just talk, Mark continued, his footsteps moving through the house. Face to face, like adults. No more outside interference. His voice was getting closer to the bedroom. The doorknob turned slowly. I'd forgotten to lock it. The door swung open, and Mark stood in the doorway with that terrible, controlled calm. His eyes took in the packed suitcase on the bed, the fear on my face, the phone in my trembling hands. Going somewhere? He asked softly. Going somewhere? He asked softly. I clutched the phone tighter, knowing Sarah could hear everything. Mark's eyes flicked to it, and his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Hang up, he said, still using that eerily calm voice. This is between us. No. The word came out smaller than I intended, but I didn't hang up. Mark stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a quiet click that sounded like a death knell. Sarah, I'm going to ask you one more time. Hang up the phone. She's on her way, I said, backing toward the window. Sarah's coming to get me. Is she? Mark pulled out his own phone, showing me the screen. Because I just watched her get pulled over 3 blocks away. Amazing how quickly the police respond to reports of erratic driving. My heart sank. He'd called in a false report to delay her. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. You can't keep me here, I whispered. Keep you here? Sarah, this is your home. Our home. I'm not keeping you anywhere. He sat down on the edge of the bed, right next to my suitcase, his movement casual and unthreatening. Which somehow made it worse. I'm just trying to understand why my wife is running away instead of talking to me. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced. Making my fear seem unreasonable, my escape attempts seem like abandonment. I'm not running away. I'm leaving a dangerous situation. Dangerous? Mark's eyebrows rose in apparent surprise. Sarah, have I ever seriously hurt you? Have I ever put you in the hospital? Broken any bones? It was the same logic he'd always used, measuring his violence against some imaginary scale where only the worst possible outcomes counted as real abuse. As if the bruises and the fear and the walking on eggshells were somehow acceptable because they weren't catastrophic enough. You don't have to hospitalize someone to hurt them, I said. But I've never meant to hurt you at all. His voice took on a pleading quality that might have fooled someone who hadn't seen him try to hit me an hour ago. Everything that's happened has been accidents, misunderstandings. You know that, don't you? On the phone, I could hear Sarah arguing with a police officer, her voice rising in frustration. Mark heard it too, and his smile became more genuine. See? She's going to be busy for a while. Traffic violations can be so time-consuming to sort out. He reached over and unzipped my suitcase, starting to pull out my clothes. Why don't we unpack this and talk like rational adults? Don't touch my things. These are our things, Sarah. In our house. That we pay for together. Each word was measured, reasonable, making me feel like the irrational one for objecting. I talked to Johnson after the meeting was postponed. Do you know what he told me? I didn't answer, but Mark continued anyway. He said there might be ways to resolve this situation quietly. Internal mediation, sensitivity training, that sort of thing. But only if all parties involved are willing to be flexible about their recollections. The threat was wrapped in corporate speak, but it was unmistakable. He was asking me to lie, to recant, to help him bury this. And if I'm not flexible? Mark's hand stilled on my clothes, and when he looked up, I saw a flash of something cold and calculating in his eyes. Then we'll have to find other ways to protect our family's reputation, he said quietly. Our shared reputation. After all, Sarah, Mud has a way of sticking to everyone it touches. The implication hung in the air between us. If he went down, he'd take me with him somehow. Paint me as unstable, vindictive, a liar seeking attention. Outside, I could hear Sarah's voice getting more distant as the police officer led her further from her car. I was trapped, and Mark knew it. But then I remembered the flash drive in my jacket pocket. The hours of recordings I'd made, documenting every love tap and dismissive response. The evidence Mark didn't know existed. Actually, I said, straightening my spine, I don't think your boss knows the whole story yet. Mark's hands paused on my clothes. What do you mean? I mean Jennifer only heard what happened today. She doesn't know about the pattern. The months of escalation. The recordings. The word dropped between us like a bomb. Mark's face went completely white. Recordings? I pulled out the flash drive, holding it up so he could see it. Every conversation. Every time you hit me and called it something else. Every time you told me I was being dramatic or sensitive or imagining things. Mark lunged for it, but I was faster, clutching it against my chest and backing toward the window. How long? His voice was strangled now, all pretense of calm control gone. How long have you been recording me? Long enough. You can't do this to me, he said, desperation bleeding through his anger. Sarah, you can't destroy my entire career over a few misunderstandings. They weren't misunderstandings. The words came out louder than I'd intended, months of suppressed anger finally finding their voice. You knew exactly what you were doing every single time you put your hands on me. I never meant. Stop lying. I was shouting now, and it felt incredible. Stop lying to me, stop lying to yourself. You meant it every single time, and you enjoyed watching me make excuses for you. Mark's mask was completely gone now, replaced by something ugly and desperate. Give me the drive, Sarah. No. He took a step closer, and I saw his hands flex at his sides. Give it to me right now, or I swear to God. You'll what? Hit me again? In front of another witness? I gestured toward the phone, which was still connected to Sarah's call. Because she can hear every word you're saying. Mark's eyes darted to the phone, and I saw him realize his mistake. He'd been so focused on controlling me that he'd forgotten about the audience listening to everything. Sarah, he said, trying to reconstruct his reasonable tone, you're being hysterical. There's nothing on those recordings that would interest anyone. Then you won't mind if I share them. The standoff stretched between us, and I could see Mark calculating, trying to find an angle that would give him back control. But for the first time in months, I held all the cards. My phone buzzed with a text. Sarah had managed to send a message despite being detained. Asterisk police coming to house. Told them domestic disturbance. Hold on, asterisk. Mark didn't see the text, but he must have noticed my expression change because his eyes narrowed. What? Nothing, I said, but I couldn't keep a hint of hope out of my voice. Bullshit. What aren't you telling me? In the distance, I heard the faint wail of sirens. Mark heard them too, his head snapping toward the window with a look of pure panic. You called the police? His voice cracked on the words. Sarah did. The sirens were getting closer, and Mark's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. I watched him realize that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down in the most public way possible. Sarah, listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice taking on a threatening edge I'd never heard before. When those cops get here, you're going to tell them this was all a mistake. A miscommunication. Do you understand me? But I was already moving toward the bedroom door, the flash drive clutched in my hand and my phone pressed to my ear. No, Mark, I said. I really don't think I am. The sirens were getting louder, but Mark moved faster than I expected. He lunged forward and grabbed my wrist, the same wrist he'd squeezed too hard countless times before, but this time his grip was desperate, panicked. You're not going anywhere until we figure this out, he hissed, his fingers digging into my skin hard enough to leave new bruises. Sarah, I'm serious. You tell them everything's fine, or what? I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. You'll hurt me worse? In front of police officers? The sirens were right outside now, car doors slamming in our driveway. Mark's eyes darted between me and the window, and I could see him spiraling, trying to calculate damage control when there was no control left. They won't believe you anyway, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You think some recordings and a few bruises are going to destroy everything I built? I'm a respected attorney, Sarah. You're just a hysterical wife having a breakdown. But even as he said it, I could hear the fear underneath. The same man who'd spent months making me feel small and powerless was terrified of losing his precious reputation. Heavy footsteps were approaching the front door now. Authoritative voices calling out. Mark's grip on my wrist loosened slightly as reality crashed over him. There was no talking his way out of this, no charming smile that would make the police disappear. Please, he whispered, and for a moment he sounded like the man I'd married. Vulnerable, lost, genuinely frightened. Sarah, please don't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to us, I said quietly, pulling my wrist free. This is what you did. To me, to that woman at your office, probably to others I don't even know about. The front door rattled with heavy knocking. Police. Open up. Mark's face cycled through desperation, anger, and something that looked almost like grief. I can change, he said urgently. I swear to God, Sarah, I can be different. Just give me one more chance. You've had months of chances. But now I understand. No, you don't. I backed toward the bedroom door, keeping my eyes on him. You understand that you got caught. There's a difference. The knocking was getting more insistent now. I could hear Sarah's voice mixed with the officers, explaining the situation, giving them context I'd never been brave enough to provide before. Mark ran his hands through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my career? To our finances? To everything we've worked for? Do you have any idea what the last 3 months have done to me? He stopped pacing and really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment when he realized I wasn't the same woman who'd been making excuses for him. The woman standing in this bedroom had found her voice, and she wasn't going to be silenced again. You've changed, he said, and there was something almost accusatory in his tone. Yes, I have. The bedroom door was right behind me now. One more step and I'd be in the hallway, closer to the police, closer to safety. But Mark was watching me with the intensity of a predator calculating whether his prey might escape. Sarah, he said very quietly, if you walk out that door, if you go through with this, there's no coming back. You understand that, right? This ends everything. I met his eyes one last time, seeing the man who'd promised to love and protect me, who'd slowly transformed into someone who used love as a weapon. Good, I said, and stepped into the hallway. Behind me, I heard Mark sink onto the bed with something that sounded like a sob. The police were still knocking, but now I was walking toward the sound instead of hiding from it. The front door felt heavier than it should have as I turned the deadbolt and pulled it open. 2 uniformed officers stood on my porch, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a younger man whose hand rested casually on his radio. Behind them, Sarah was pacing near her car, her face tight with worry. Ma'am, we received a report of a domestic disturbance, the female officer said, her voice professional but gentle. Are you Sarah Davidson? Yes. The word came out steady, stronger than I felt. Is your husband home? He's in the bedroom. I stepped aside to let them in, and the simple act of inviting help into my house felt revolutionary. His name is Mark Davidson. The officers exchanged glances, and I realized they'd probably already run his name, seen his clean record, his respectable job. Part of me expected them to dismiss this as a misunderstanding. After all, Mark was charming, successful, the kind of man who played golf with judges. Mrs. Davidson, are you injured? The female officer asked, studying my face with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I reached up and slowly wiped away the concealer I'd layered over the bruise. The purple mark stood out starkly against my pale skin, and both officers' expressions hardened. When did this happen? Yesterday morning. But it's not the first time. I pulled out the flash drive, my hands surprisingly steady. I have recordings. Months of them. From the bedroom came the sound of Mark's footsteps, slow and defeated. He appeared in the hallway looking nothing like the competent attorney who'd left for work that morning. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed with what might have been tears. Officers, he said, and I could hear him trying to summon his courtroom voice. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sir, please don't move any closer, the male officer interrupted, stepping slightly in front of me. We need to speak with your wife. Mark's eyes found mine across the small distance that felt like a chasm. Sarah, please. Tell them this is all blown out of proportion. But I wasn't the woman who'd been making excuses anymore. No, Mark. I won't. The next hour passed in a blur of questions, photographs of my bruises, and the surreal experience of watching my husband be read his rights. He didn't resist. Some part of him seemed to have finally accepted that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. As they led him to the patrol car, he looked back at me one last time. I did love you, he said quietly. I know you don't believe me, but I did. I believe you, I replied, and meant it. But love isn't supposed to leave bruises. Sarah wrapped her arms around me as we watched the police car disappear down our street. Neighbors had come out to stare, and I knew by tomorrow the whole story would be neighborhood gossip. But for the first time in months, I didn't care what other people thought. What happens now? Sarah asked softly. I looked at the house that had been my prison, thinking about restraining orders and divorce papers and the long process of rebuilding a life I'd almost forgotten I was allowed to want. Now I remember who I used to be, I said. And I figure out who I want to become. The bruise on my cheek was already starting to fade, and for the first time since this all began, I knew it would be the last one Mark Davidson ever gave me. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be silent anymore.